Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I didn't expect to have to do another Senate update so quickly, but 16 polls have been released since I did the last one, including some that show some very close races coming into better focus. That to me warrants a video. As with last time, the states that are already colored are states that I consider to be safe for their party. If there are any changes down the road during the campaign, I will make those changes then, but as of right now, these states are safe and I do not see them going anywhere. We'll start with one of the more obvious gray surprises on the map. Arizona has been a longtime GOP stronghold, until recently, that is. This is a special election for the seat of Senator Martha McSally. Now, McSally was appointed to the seat after suffering a defeat in 2018 when longtime Senator John McCain passed away. Now she is fighting to keep the seat for the full 6-year term, and polls show her getting crushed by Democratic nominee Mark Kelly. So why is it gray here? I said in the last video if the polls continued to show double-digit leads, I would change the race from likely to safe. Well, it has, and I did. Safe Democrat. While we're on the subject of safe Democratic seats, I want to touch very briefly on Colorado. Since he dropped out of the presidential race, polls have shown former Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper double digits ahead of current Republican Senator Cory Gardner. Gardner is the most endangered GOP senator in this year's election. Hickenlooper's primary became complicated by a lackluster performance, and some doubts were raised about his chances in the general election. Hickenlooper won his primary easily, and after pre-primary polls showed him with a double-digit lead over Gardner, the first poll after his victory showed Hickenlooper with a double-digit lead over Gardner. So no changes, safe Democrat. Alaska is gray on this map only because no one has done any polling in nearly a year. That's usually a telling sign, and Alaska has been a solidly red state that has thrown the blue team a bone or two in the past. But the polling from last August did show a surprisingly small lead for Republican Senator Dan Sullivan. Sullivan eked out a surprisingly small 4-point victory during his first term back in 2014. That's not enough to make this a safe state, but history does suggest the seat will stay in GOP hands, likely Republican until further polling. Some controversy has hit Alabama Republican Senate candidate Tommy Tuberville today. It's being reported that after leaving his cushy gig as the head football coach at Auburn University, Tuberville co-founded a hedge fund that was more of a Ponzi scheme than a hedge fund. In fact, Tuberville's partner went to jail over it. Tuberville's lawyer claims ignorance on the part of his campaign by saying it's not illegal to be naive. It's not, but it does make people question a candidate's judgment. He's still the favorite to win the nomination, but the attack ads almost write themselves for current Democratic Senator Doug Jones. Jones' other potential opponent, former Senator Jeff Sessions, is trying to get his old job back, but is not well liked in the state anymore after running afoul of President Donald Trump over the Mueller investigation. Polls show him performing worse than Tuberville against Jones, but still leading, if only by a small margin. In 2018, Jones won because the good people of Alabama nominated an accused child molester as their Republican nominee. That's why I still consider Tuberville the favorite, because if an accused child molester is acceptable enough to win the nomination, being possibly complicit in a financial scheme has to be considered about as bad as a parking ticket by comparison. Jones has been considered a dead man walking ever since he won, but both situations could give him a life raft considering the benefit of incumbency. Still, until polling after this potential scandal has been done, the state remains likely Republican. There has been no additional polling since my last Senate video, but there is little evidence to believe the race in Mississippi between currently appointed Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith and Democratic nominee Mike Espy has changed at all. Smith has been polling near 50%, and only one poll in the last few months has shown her with a single-digit lead. Once she hits 50%, Espy is toast. Likely Republican, but probably not for much longer. The only recent poll in the race for Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen's seat didn't even include any of the 4 Republicans currently running for the chance to face her. What little polling there is shows her trouncing each one of them. Until the GOP can coalesce around their chosen candidate, this is Shaheen's seat to lose, likely Democrat. I said in the last video that I wasn't moving Democratic Senator Mark Warner's race out of the blue column until there's some polling showing one of the unknowns running for the right to face him. I also said I wouldn't make it safe, although it probably is, until there has been some polling. There hasn't, because no company wants to waste money in a pandemic. Likely Democrat. Polling since my last Senate video showed Democratic Michigan Senator Gary Peters with a sizable lead over Republican candidate John James. I already had the race ranked as likely, but the lack of a double-digit lead kept it from advancing to safe. Unless James makes some traction soon, this will go from its current state as likely Democrat to safe. Texas polling has been very good for presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden, showing him with either a small lead or within striking distance. In Texas. I'm never going to get used to saying that. In 2018, Democratic Senate nominee Beto O'Rourke came close in his attempt to unseat highly unpopular Republican Senator Ted Cruz. In spite of the close presidential race, Democrats' chances to flip a Texas Senate seat appear to have closed. Polling since the last video shows current Senator John Cornyn with a high single-digit lead. I don't see that changing unless Biden starts blowing Trump's doors off in the Lone Star State. Likely Republican. South Carolinians don't like their three-term Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Graham saved himself from being primaried by hugging Donald Trump tighter than a boa constrictor. With the threat passed, he's been a little more critical of the White House, especially of late, but not to the point of being a convert. Still, that likely won't help his numbers, which already show him in a surprisingly tight race with Democratic nominee Jamie Harrison. Harrison, in another apparent case of supposedly dead ticket splitting, is running ahead of Biden in the Palmetto State. It probably won't be enough, but even winning in South Carolina by just 5 points should give it a Republican pause. Likely Republican, but just barely, pending more polling. Kansas remains the most bizarre race on this map. It's a very red state in recent history, yet it also has a Democratic governor and a toxic GOP Senate candidate from the race against said Democratic governor. Being in the primary has created a slight sense of uncertainty. The primary isn't until August, but polls show the state split depending on who wins the Republican nomination, Representative Roger Marshall or the aforementioned toxic candidate Chris Kobach. Since Kobach would still have a chance to keep it close and maybe even pull out a win in the general election, Marshall has a solid lead against Democrat Barbara Boyer in polls. The state only leans Republican until the primary chooses their candidate. Now on to Georgia, the only state to have 2 seats up for grabs thanks to a special election this year. Georgia Senator David Perdue, whose seat is the one that's up for its normal election slot, is in a surprisingly close race with Democratic nominee Jon Ossoff. Polls earlier in the year showed Perdue with a moderate but smaller for recent history lead. Since capturing the nomination, however, Ossoff has either led or been slightly behind Perdue. Then there's Perdue acknowledging at a fundraiser that the Democrats have turned Georgia into a swing state. This one is going to be close. Much closer than anticipated, and likely has to do with Biden's strength in the state's polls of late. Still, Perdue has been shown to be ahead more than he hasn't. Leans Republican until more polling is available. The second seat is the election for the seat Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler was appointed to by the state's governor, thereby pissing off President Trump to no end. She is trailing federal Republican candidate Representative Doug Collins, the man Trump did want in that seat. There are Democrats in the field, but the field is split with no one candidate pulling away yet. Georgia races require a 50% majority to declare a winner, and it's unlikely in this race that any of the candidates will get the required amount in November. Should that happen, the top 2 finishers, regardless of party, advance to the runoff. What is striking is Loeffler hasn't even been polling in second place to qualify for the runoff lately. She is currently polling third behind one of the Democrats, depending on which poll you look at. If she and Collins finish in the top 2, then it's a guaranteed GOP hold, and it will likely go to Collins. If one of the Democrats finishes in the top 2, let's be honest here, the chances of 2 Democrats advancing is about as good as Kanye West actually winning the presidency. It depends on who they go up against. If Loeffler squeaks out a top 2 spot, the Democrats' chances go up for picking up the seat, since Loeffler's stock scandal has made her damaged goods. but if it's Collins, it likely doesn't flip, and Trump gets his choice for the seat in the first place, although he ironically might not go with him. For now, I expect Collins to finish first in both the general and the runoff, likely Republican. The obituary for ticket splitting has been written many, many times over the last few elections. The basis of this theory is the country is so polarized, very few people vote Democrat in one race while voting Republican in another. People who seem to think that's some sort of new concept forget that many people used to vote by handing a slip of pre-printed paper with the entire party ticket on it, and that was used as their ballot. If Texas and South Carolina are bringing that theory into question, then Montana is stretching it to the limit. Multiple polls show Trump with a definite but small lead in the state, and former Democratic Governor Steve Bullock with a definite but small lead over current Republican Senator Steve Daines. The battle of the Steves looks like it's going to go down to the wire, but too many polls show Bullock with a lead to ignore right now. Leans Democrat. When it comes to the part that North Carolina is going to play in this election, it's going to be part of ground zero. Obama won the state in 2008, while Romney and Trump brought it back to the Republican fold 4 and 8 years later. Current polls suggest a very close race on the presidential side, with both candidates seemingly trading leads with each new poll. The Senate race is a completely different story. All polls show Democratic candidate Cal Cunningham with a small but very consistent lead. I said last video that it was possible that Trump could drag current Republican Senator Thom Tillis across the finish line with a win, but Cunningham has too many poll leads now under his belt. Leans Democrat. Iowa's Republican Senator Joni Ernst is in a serious fight. While the leads have been small, all but one poll has shown her Democratic challenger Teresa Greenfield ahead for nearly 3 months, and that one poll showed her only 1 point behind. One of those poll leads is also from renowned pollster Ann Selzer, and no one knows Iowa voters like Selzer. That one poll holds more weight than the other polls combined. Leads Democrat. Maine Senator Susan Collins is arguably the second most vulnerable Republican senator up for re-election in November. Her concern for President Trump's various controversies over the years has damaged her maverick image as being all talk with nothing to back it up. For many, her support of Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination, claiming that he promised her he considered Roe v. Wade to be set precedent, was the final straw. When he broke that promise recently and voted to support strict state limitations, that damage likely became permanent. While it's too early to rule her out or even label this as a safe or likely seat for the Democrats, only one poll has shown Collins ahead against Democrat Sarah Gideon. Leans Democrat. And that brings the total to 52 for the Democrats and 48 for Republicans, which gives them control of the Senate. If Biden wins the White House, they would only need 50, where they need 51 for control with a Trump victory. Currently, it doesn't matter who wins the presidency as far as the Senate goes, because Democrats would be in control if these numbers hold. It should be noted, however, if another blue wave develops, just like 2018, Kansas and one of the Georgia seats would immediately be stronger targets for the Democrats. But I see their ceiling being no more than 54. Republicans can take solace in noting 3 of the Democratic pickups right now are not in the bag yet. Holding those 3, or 2 out of the 3 if Trump wins, will have them keeping control by the skin of their teeth, but I think it's relatively safe to predict Democrats will make gains in the Senate this election. The question is, will it be enough to also gain control?